So good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Stacey Smith, the Executive Director for the Cybersecurity Association of Maryland. Thanks for joining us for our Cybersecurity for Small Businesses, and thanks to the Daily Record for presenting this opportunity for us to offer such an informational and important program. I'm joined today by Angie, Barnett, President and CEO of the Better Business Bureau of Greater Maryland, Darrell, Laffoon, Vice President of Technology for cybersecurity company EZShield, and Cybersecurity Specialist Mike Volk from PSA Insurance and Financial Services. The format for today's program, Angie and I are going to talk a little bit about our organizations and why we're bringing this program to you, and then we're going to turn the program over to our two experts, Darrell and Mike, who will provide some tips and information on why you're all here, tips and information for cybersecurity for small businesses. So first thing, cybersecurity risks are real and substantial. Advances in technology make our daily lives more automated and interconnected, rendering not only our computers at risk for cyber attacks, but also things like autos, our cell phones, even healthcare devices. And the adversaries, or the bad actors as they're often referred to, they're stepping up their game too. Cyber attacks are increasing in sophistication, variety, and frequency. As many of you probably have heard before, every business, every government entity is at risk and is vulnerable. And the financial damages from cybersecurity threats and attacks are projected to be in the trillions of dollars. And so it's a serious business. And there's no way to make your business bulletproof, but you can dramatically reduce your cybersecurity threat and damage risk. And that's why we're offering this program, to give you some tips on that. Fortunately, Maryland is home to some of the world's best companies to keep you cyber secure. Companies like EZShield, who we have with us here today, with innovative technologies, and PSA with its years of experience providing cybersecurity insurance, and many, many others here in Maryland. Thanks to our state's proximity to the U.S. government's intelligence, defense, and homeland security agencies like the NSA, we also have the most skilled workforce in the nation. So between our innovative technologies and service providers and our workforce, we've got what's needed to keep Maryland's businesses and businesses globally cyber secure. Because of the growing demand for cybersecurity, business and government sectors, in the business and government sectors, our nonprofit organization was formed. We're the Cybersecurity Association of Maryland, Inc., or CAMI as we call ourselves for short, and we were created in 2015 to connect the businesses and government agencies that need cyber solutions with the cybersecurity providers, solution providers here in Maryland. So we're a matchmaker of sorts. And we do that through an online directory of cybersecurity companies that you can find at mdcyber.com. You'll find over 350 cybersecurity product and service providers there. And many of them are focused on helping small businesses like many of you, whether you know what you need or need initial guidance and help identifying what cybersecurity protection you need. We've got companies that can help you there at that directory. We also host a variety of programs and events throughout the year that connect businesses and government entities with our cyber companies directly face-to-face. And lastly, as I noted here, we've got the first statewide skills-based cybersecurity jobs board. We just released that a couple of weeks ago. It's mdcyberjobs.com, and we've got about 50 jobs in Maryland, cybersecurity jobs in Maryland that are available, and job seekers can go there to identify jobs that might be appropriate for them. In order to accomplish our mission, we partner with a variety of organizations in the Maryland area. We've got about 30 partner organizations, everything from economic development offices, local chambers of commerce, and one of our greatest partners is the Better Business Bureau of Greater Maryland, and that's why we've invited them to be part of this program with us, so that together we can help educate the business community and keep them cyber secure by, like I said before, connecting them with our members, the cyber companies. So at this time, I will turn it over to Angie Barnett from the Better Business Bureau.
Thank you so much. A quick note about BBB. We're a locally BBB serving Greater Maryland. We're celebrating our 100th anniversary this year. So we are a national brand with over 100 years behind us with a local presence. Our local BBB represents 2,600 accredited businesses in Maryland. Now, these are businesses who make a commitment to BBB's Code of Business Practices, which does include protecting their customers' privacy. And we are one out of 108 BBBs globally throughout, well, not globally, throughout North America. Our mission basically is to be the leader in marketplace trust. And that's what we hope we can do, is strengthen trust in the marketplace through this partnership. Why do we partner with CAMI? First and foremost, we want to help advance the trust of the small business communication through education. We actually want to help advance trust of their customers by improving business practices of our small business community to make sure they are considering the need for cybersecurity protection in their business practices. We are accredited businesses. The community pledges to uphold our standards and best practices, so this information is important to them, and we want to position BBB as a thought leader in the space of cybersecurity. It's through partnerships and education such as that BBB hopes that we are able together to break 5 myths we believe is very present for small business. One of the prevailing myths, 77% of small businesses don't believe they're at a risk of cyber attack. The small business community sometimes thinks they can't protect themselves against cyber attack. That's only for large businesses. Some small businesses believe they don't have the resources. They can't afford to protect themselves against cybersecurity. Some small businesses, in response to our surveys, said, hey, it's not our concern, the bank's going to cover our losses. And a lot of small businesses also believe that if a breach occurs, their attorney's going to help them take care of it, and they'll report it to their attorney. Why cybersecurity is important to you as a small business owner and participant of this webinar? Well, actually, 97% of the total businesses in North America are small business. Small business is an essential part of the supply chain. Think about small business takes care of our universities, colleges, our medical systems, our governmental systems. But yet 60% of the cyber attacks actually occur to small business on small business. The average cost of a small business owner is over $7,000. And the burden of proof, excuse me, and the burden of proof actually lies with the business. The business banking accounts that are hacked average a loss of $32,000. So that's the reason we want to partner with this. We believe that cyber incidents can happen to you. Of the 2,000 small businesses interviewed or surveyed recently, in 2016, 18% of those who experienced a cyber attack, their business credit cards were actually accessed. 22% of the small business community experiencing a cyber attack had financial losses. 25%, their website went down. 35%, false information sent to your email. And that's critically important because you want your customers to trust you. And when they begin to receive these emails, it does make them less likely to respond to you in the future. And 44% of the small businesses had some type of service interruption. So this partnership and this educational moment is incredibly important to BBB and being able to share this with our small business community. So thank you so much, Stacey, for making this happen.
Thanks, Angie. So now we'll turn the program over to Mike and Darrell, who are going to provide some helpful tips for you.
Great. So kind of following the theme that Angie had just laid out for you, what's going on in cyberspace now? You hear lots of information about attacks and hacks. A lot of times in the news, you'll see the big businesses, the Yahoos, government entities, Target, the one that a lot of people like to point to. But small businesses look at the news and they don't see businesses like them having this issue. Yet the statistics that Angie pointed out are real. So what we wanted to do before we dive into some of the tips, we wanted to kind of set the stage and give you some ideas about what is really happening and how small businesses actually need to respond to this type of thing.
Mike, I forgot to mention, if anyone has any questions that you'd like to submit for us to answer towards the end of the program, you can use the questions tab in the sidebar there, and we'll take some of those towards the end of the program.
Great. So what's going on? You have you've got a few different types of threat actors out there targeting different types of businesses. So you've got some of the more sophisticated, advanced, persistent threats backed by nation states, hacking into government entities for nefarious purposes, for statecraft. You've got some of the same organizations trying to take down the big targets for a financial gain. Now, what we're also seeing become more and more common is the growing business of cybercrime. And what makes cybercrime a little bit more, I guess, scary or relevant for a small business is that cybercrime is typically more distributed. And by that, cyber criminals aren't really concerned about their end target. They're more concerned about distributing their attack as widely as they can and hoping to hit as many targets and achieve their financial gain by compromising as many businesses as they possibly can. So even though you might not think you're a target, the fact that you use technology to run your business, the fact that you use email, and some of the other modern technologies that most small businesses use every day exposes you to cyber risk. The other thing we wanted to do is show you some examples that you probably won't read about in the news, and that's what we have up here on the slide. Now, these aren't necessarily small business. These are probably more medium-sized businesses, but these are great examples, relevant, happened in 2017, and this is also an example of what you would probably need to do if you had a breach. So the first one, Avanti, is a company that sells kiosks that go in office buildings for somebody to go get some lunch and they don't have to leave the office. What happened here is an attacker loaded malware onto the kiosks, and they were able to steal some sensitive data. Now, the result of that is not just the financial loss. If you look at the website, they had one of their leaders actually up on the website. This is what you see when you pull up the website, talking about this incident to protect the reputation. So it goes beyond just something that could impact you financially or impact your clients. It's something that you're going to have to talk about. Same thing with the Hildebrand and Clark CPAs. This one happened in January, and this is something that many of you probably have heard about in the news. They noticed that there were some fraudulent tax returns being filed for their clients, and through finding that out, they realized that they had an incident. Again, on the front page of their website, they're posting information about what happened, how it happened, so their clients can feel comfortable that they're doing something about it, they figured it out, and they're trying to address the issue. Another type of industry that we've been seeing more and more activity in is the nonprofit area, and it's because they deal with people and information. So the Sound Community Service, this one happened in January, and this is one where somebody actually compromised the email of one of the employees. And if we think about how we use email today, it was designed to share information, but we're sending sensitive information through attachments. We're storing contact information. So if somebody can gain access to email, the bounds of what they would be able to gain, it can get extensive pretty quickly. So they had to address it. Again, if you look up at the very top, they put a link up there that talks about what the breach actually entailed. The last one I want to talk about is not a small business. The reason we put it up here is it's because it's a type of technology that small businesses probably rely on every day to run their businesses, or they see this a lot. And that's DocuSign. And they've been hit hard pretty recently. Not the company hasn't been hacked, but people have been impersonating DocuSign, sending around attachments that look like a DocuSign document, and an unsuspecting individual at a small business opens it up, and it could install malware if the network's not protected properly. So it's definitely something that's hitting small businesses in a more distributed way, using the technology that they rely on to run their organizations. And I know Darrell has some more specific.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So just to feed off what Mike is saying about the growing problem of cybercrime, in 2015, the U.S. Director of National Intelligence ranked cybercrime as the #1 security threat in the country. So it's a really big problem. And even though most people think it's targeted at just the large organizations, the truth is everybody is part of the game. So there's a lot of reasons cyber criminals exist, but one of the reasons they do is they want to get access to your data. They want access to your customer data. They want access to your employee data because it's very lucrative for them. They can take that data and sell it on the black market. For example, for every credit card number they can get, it's worth $7. For every medical ID they get, it's $20. If they can get a bank account, that's $300. So how many customers, how many bank accounts or credit card numbers do you have that you think a cyber criminal wants access to? So it's very, the fact that you hear about all the large breaches that occur, the cyber criminal is really starting to prefer to go after the small businesses because small businesses typically just don't have the resources to protect themselves or the knowledge of what to do. Which hopefully after you're done here today you'll have at least a few more things to think about. So the cyber risk game, it's a low risk, high return game for the cyber criminal. You have valuable data, you don't necessarily have the resources to protect yourself or you don't know how to do it yet. That makes you a very easy target. And while it's lucrative for the cyber criminal, it can be very expensive to you. Estimates are for every cyber criminal incident that happens to you is going to cost you $7,000 to $10,000. Service interruption, legal compliance costs, even direct financial losses, not to mention the reputational loss that you could suffer. So the real question you have to ask yourself is how many cyber crimes can you afford to suffer through?
Great. So now that we've sufficiently scared everybody, what we wanted to do is kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the things that you can start doing now to position yourself better, to defend your business in cyberspace. So we've got some kind of more broadly focused areas to start thinking about strategically, and then some more immediate types of tips that most businesses can actually start doing today. So before we really pinpoint the tips, the best place for most small businesses to start with cyber risk or really any type of risk is figuring out what risk you have. So do something today to get a better understanding of what your cyber risk looks like. And the reason that you do this is because you need to know what you have. Darrell mentioned data. What kind of data do you have? What does your network look like? What could a cyber criminal attack? If you don't know these types of things, it's really hard to implement technology solutions or even process solutions to try to defend yourself. So on this slide here, what we've done is try to simplify what cyber risk is. And again, this is such a hot topic in the media right now that you're going to see lots of headlines about businesses that have been hacked. But what is cyber risk? What is actually happening, and what do you need to think about as a business? So think about cyber risk from the perspective of what you do as a business. Think about the likely threats that are going to be coming after you. So in this presentation, we've been talking about cybercrime. For small businesses, cyber criminals are a more likely threat actor to think about than maybe a nation state or a hacktivist or somebody like that. The next thing you need to think about are your vulnerabilities, and this is going to take some time to think through what you do as a business, what technology you use, how are your people preventing things like social engineering, all sorts of different things that create vulnerabilities in your organization. So where could a cyber criminal attack? Next, and probably most important, are how could a cyber attack or a cyber incident impact your business? So if, let's say, somebody stole data, what would that cost you in reputation, in costs to respond, in legal expenses to consult with somebody to help you figure out what laws you might have to comply with? Business interruption, let's say some of the technology that you use to run your business goes down, how could that impact you? So kind of thinking through these key components helps you figure out where you should be spending your time and effort when you start developing a cyber strategy. The most important takeaway from this slide, I think, is that if you do nothing to understand where your cyber risks and exposures are, you're most likely to learn about them from a cyber criminal when they expose them for you.
Good point.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Mike, the most important thing I think you can do is accept the fact and assume that you are a target. Continue to educate yourself around what cyber risk is. Attending webinars like this is a good start. Make sure you're looking to connect up with some cybersecurity resources. If you don't have that type of expertise in-house, go out there and find someone that you can work with. And probably the most important thing is, from an organizational standpoint, is start to have a security-minded culture at your company. Security is not just an operational check the box anymore. It's really something that's of strategic value to your company.
Yeah, top of mind.
Yeah, and those are typically cyber, so a company can do a cyber risk assessment for you to help you uncover that. You can also work with advisors that you currently have to kind of give you another set of eyes. That's what we work with our clients to do, kind of a high-level review to start that process. So there's definitely resources out there to help you. Don't think that you're on your own doing this. So tying right into understanding your unique cyber risk is once you have a lay of the land of what your attack surface might look like, that is, the technology you use, the network that you have, the devices that you're using that a cyber criminal could attack. What does that surface look like? How can you reduce that surface? And I think Darrell may have mentioned this earlier, that small businesses typically don't have the resources and money and people to do some of the things that bigger business might do. So a large, like a Target or a financial institution, has a security operations center with a team of people dedicated to running the technology and securing the business. A small business doesn't have that resource, and there's no way that they should be expected to do something like that. So the point here is finding, once you have an idea about what your cyber risk looks like, what can you do as a small business to minimize that? And there's a few different ways that many businesses are looking externally for help in these areas. A great one is a good place to start from a technology perspective is to take a look at getting somebody to help you manage that. So you're not managing the security infrastructure on your own. So there's managed security service providers, and that's exactly what they do. They'll manage the security devices for a business. Another thing that we hear a lot about, good and bad, and we're going to try to dispel some of the myths today, are looking at cloud service providers. So cloud service providers, what they are able to do are take data from your internal network and host it on their services. That's a good thing because it's less that your internal IT folks have to worry about protecting, and you're offloading that to an organization that their business is in protecting your data. So if something goes wrong, it's really an existential threat to the entire cloud services model. And they have those security operations centers and teams. They've got people dedicated specifically to security. So moving that out of your network, so if a criminal gets on your network, as long as they're not stealing credentials into your cloud services, they're not going to find that data if they get into your network. Another thing that's really important for small businesses to do, because again, they probably don't have the budgets to hire a chief information security officer. That's unrealistic for a 10-person company, is to reach out to local resources. And again, Stacey mentioned this. We've got some tremendous expertise in this region. So there's something that's called virtual chief information security officer that actually can help somebody, a small business, come in, help you develop a strategy, and then you can move on and execute that strategy with their guidance or without their guidance if you have a really strong plan. But again, the idea is to understand your risk, look at what you have, try to minimize what you're trying to protect and manage on your own, so that way you become less of a target. Again, cybercrime is a crime of opportunity, so if they are trying to do a broadly distributed attack and your neighbor looks more attractive, that's going to get hit as opposed to you.
Yeah, and just to kind of give you a little more insight to some of the things you can do, I'm going to start off, because the goal being to be less attractive to the cyber criminals. I'm going to use a metaphor. I'm going to call it the castle strategy. You have king number one, and he has a bunch of gold that he wants to protect, so he sets up shop in some little town or some village, and he has this big army, and he tells his army to go out and surround the village. So he's got this big circle of soldiers surrounding his village, and every night he goes to bed feeling pretty secure. But eventually, some small armies come along, and they realize they don't have to defeat that whole army. They just have to probe along the circle and find the weakness. And if they just concentrate their effort there and break through, they're in, right? So basically what that king did is he set up a very large attack surface and made it easier for a smaller army to defeat him. He also only had one line of defense, right? So king number 2, he has a smaller army, same amount of gold, so he's just as interested in protecting it. What he does is he pulls his army in real close to him, concentrates it in a smaller area. And so now they have less area to defend, but he also adds some additional layers. Puts a big wall, big tall wall, thick wall around it, puts just one gate, big heavy gate at the opening of the castle. And if he wants to, he can put a moat around there and add some other really cool castle technology. But what he's basically done is he's flipped the script now. He's got a smaller army that can actually hold off and defend against a much larger army because he's reduced his attack surface and he's added multiple layers of defense. And that's what we want you to do. We want you to stop thinking like maybe King 1, where, oh, you know, I got an antivirus, I'm done, and start thinking that actually I need to rethink what I'm doing and start looking for ways to reduce the attack surface and add multiple lines of defense to my castle. So the castle you want to build, I refer to it as the information security plan or program. Information security plan, maybe that sounds kind of, you know, daunting, so just call it the plan, you know, but it's really, what you want to do is build your castle the size you need it to be, but recognize that it's of strategic value to you. It needs to do 2 things. It needs to identify the risks, and that's that list, that assessment that Mike was talking about earlier could get you. What do you have to defend? Where are the vulnerabilities? But then it needs to fortify, and that is figuring out which defenses you can put in place to defend those areas. And we definitely say you should take a layered approach to that. When you build your castle, you want to make sure that the walls are strong and the gates are robust. So we definitely recommend reaching out and getting expert guidance and building your plan and protecting yourself. As Mike said, you know, CAMI and BBB, these are great resources to help you find companies. If you don't have that type of expertise in-house today, the resources are out there. And the good news is that because it's recognized that small businesses need this type of plan and program now, companies are building very robust, you know, cost-effective programs that are actually affordable for small companies, like the virtual chief information security officer or other security as a service type offerings. So definitely look to take advantage of those. Now, there's 2 more things I want to mention before we go to the next slide. Just want to talk a little bit more, just a little bit deeper about the multi-layered approach. I'm going to give you a list of things that would go into a good information security program. This isn't everything that could go into it, and you certainly don't have to do all these things, but it's just a list to make you start thinking about the kind of things you could be doing. For example, do you practice role-based access? Do people in your organization, do you control that they only get to see and deal with the information they should have access to? Do you practice change management, meaning that, you know, are you aware of when parts of your system are changing, or do you have a rollback strategy if something changes when it shouldn't? What about your hiring practices, and are you doing background checks from a security point of view? Are you providing some sort of ongoing education and about data privacy and security for your employees, making them aware of what role they play in information security? Are your systems being updated on a regular basis, and are you getting your security patches? Do you have a good backup and data recovery strategy? Do you have access to third-party auditing and testing? I could give you a bunch more. The point is that to make a good security information program, to build a good castle, there's multiple ways that you can start defending yourself, and that's where getting some expert help can definitely help you. And finally, to go back to what Mike mentioned about cloud services, you know, sometimes it's a question I've gotten before: are cloud services safe? It's counterintuitive, but the truth is not only can they be safe, but they can actually be safer than what you can do yourself. And the reason that is, now, first of all, you need to make sure you're dealing with reputable, enterprise-ready providers, but they do the heavy lifting for you. You look at companies like Google, Microsoft with Office 365, Amazon with Amazon Web Services. Many of you may already be using some of these companies. When you use their services, they are basically giving you an army of people out there helping protect your data. They're building layers around your data, and you didn't even know it. So cloud can actually make you more secure.
Yeah, and just to kind of touch on a couple of the things that Darrell was talking about there. So he gave you a lot of good things to think about. This also brings up another point that I just wanted to address before we move on, that there's a difference between information technology and security. So a really strong IT person could be really well versed in making sure your network runs, making sure it's managed, making sure people have access. The security of that can sometimes be different. So if you have one person managing all of that, it can get overwhelming quickly. So again, look to service providers to help offload some of that so that your IT team can focus on making sure that you can access what you need to access and things are working, and then bring some help in to secure that. And then I think it's also important to talk about some of the things that you might consider moving outside of your physical network. So you could look at your email. There's a lot of good solutions today to take your email server outside of your physical network, have somebody else manage that for you. A lot of the document sharing type services are becoming more secure. There's some great ones here in Maryland that can help you with some of that kind of stuff. Again, if somebody gets into your castle, I love that analogy. They break into the castle, despite your best efforts, and they don't find information there. You win and the bad guy loses. So with that, I guess we can move on to the next slide with some more specific types of tips that you can start doing today.
Yeah, so building your castle, that could be a longer-term journey for you. You can start and you can iterate and build it as you go. But we wanted to definitely give you a few things that you could actually act on quickly if you already aren't doing them. So here's just 5 sort of common sense things that you can be looking at that either you or maybe your IT folks can start to do very quickly. One, make sure that all your systems are password protected. And make sure you have a password policy in place that talks about using strong passwords. Don't use common phrases. Strong passwords should be of relatively good length. 20 characters is good, at least. Lowercase, uppercase, symbols, numbers. Just Google strong passwords. It'll give you all kinds of tips on how to do that. Don't share passwords. I bet you that some of you probably have critical systems where multiple people in your organization have the password credentials and you're sharing them. That's not a good policy, so you should look to change that. For sensitive areas, you should look to change your passwords frequently. And if you need to, look for a good, strong password manager solution. They're out there, and they can help you actually improve your password program. And if you have systems that offer it, make sure you take advantage of dual and multi-authentication. For example, if you're using Gmail or Google Docs or Office 365, you can set those up so that instead of just using your username and password, you can also have another piece of information that's generated in real time, usually sent to your cell phone. Makes it much more difficult for someone to get into that system. Make sure you're practicing safe email habits. As a rule, at EZShield, we never share customer or employee PII or MPI as personal identifiable information or non-public information. So be wary of the kind of information you're passing back and forth via email. It's not the most secure way to pass that kind of information. Be very careful, and you should talk to your folks about this. Links and attachments in email can be the way in. That's the Trojan horse into your castle. So just being aware that emails can come in if they have links and attachments. Everyone should be on guard that it may be something nefarious. And if your system has it, make sure you turn on antivirus, anti-malware, anti-phishing software. If you're using some of these cloud providers, they probably have those available to you. So make sure you're using them. Number 3, encrypt your sensitive data. Today, most machines ship with some sort of encryption capability built in. Make sure you turn it on. Essentially, that means if you have a laptop and it gets stolen, if that's encrypted, then it's much more difficult for someone to get to whatever data is on that hard drive. You should especially do that for anything that's sensitive. If you use Wi-Fi, make sure your Wi-Fi at the office is secure. Don't let it be accessible to the public. And as a rule, you may want to consider not connecting your organization's assets to public Wi-Fi. If you really have people that need to work remotely in a situation like that, consider getting a MiFi type solution, or look at something called a VPN. And finally, make sure your systems are just being kept up to date. Those updates don't always just deliver cool features to your phone or to your computer, but they are also addressing known security vulnerabilities. So these are just 5 things that are kind of low-hanging fruit that you can start doing right now as you start to build out a more robust castle.
And then before I jump into the next slide, that we did have a question. I think we addressed it, but I just wanted to pause for a second. So the question was, can you restate how the cloud reduces the attack risk? So just quickly, so the idea, so we'll go back to the castle imagery. So you build your fortification around your sensitive data. You, as a small business, are responsible for maintaining that wall and making sure that the data that's inside that wall is secure. So let's say that data is on a server. So somebody gets in, breaks your wall, they can get that data as soon as they get in. So let's say you take that data, let's call it an email server, and you move that to a cloud service provider. So somebody breaks into your castle because you only have one person that's maintaining that wall, so they come around the back and nobody saw them. They get into your castle looking for that email server and it's not there. So that's what we're trying to talk about when we're talking about reducing your attack surface. Now you're still responsible for that data. So even though it's sitting on a cloud service provider, like think of Office 365. So Office 365 is responsible for maintaining the security. They're doing some cool things like putting in phishing protection and spam and other types of things that you don't have to worry about. But that data is still yours. So if there's a compromise in any way, you're going to still be responsible for it, just like you would if it was inside your network perimeter. But instead of protecting the data, the security, the wall, now your biggest responsibility is some of the things that Darrell was talking about, like protecting passwords. So as long as somebody's not able to get into your network and steal a password and then get into the cloud, that's going to be the scenario that cybercriminal would look at. So hopefully that helps paint the picture of what we're talking about reducing your attack surface, reducing the things that you have to defend. The data is still yours, so you still have to treat it the same whether it's on a local server or in the cloud, but the amount of effort it takes to defend it physically is a lot less when you're outsourcing certain types of things. And it's not perfect in every situation, and every data, every server and every type of business is going to be different. But the idea is to try to make it so somebody doesn't break into your network and get everything. All right, so is a kind of good lead into the next slide. So as you're thinking about reducing your attack surface by moving data outside of technologies that you have to physically defend with your people and your money and your technology, you're going to start to rely on vendors and IT service providers to help you manage that sensitive data. So as you're looking to go down this road, going back to the point I made a few moments ago, you're still responsible for that data. So if there is a breach, you're still going to be responsible for things like notifying clients that their data's been exposed. So what you're doing when you're moving data from a physical server that you maintain to a cloud service provider is that you're trusting that they're implementing the correct type of security. Now, when you're working with an IT service provider, you definitely want to make sure that you're working with somebody that you trust. And then you don't want to just trust that they're managing things correctly and they're implementing security measures as you would hope they are. You want to verify that. So the first thing that you want to do when you work with an IT service provider that's either managing, handling, doing anything with your data or anything sensitive is that you want to review and validate vendor security controls. So typically these will be outlined in a contract I've seen contracts that say things like, we maintain data with modern security controls. Well, what does that mean? So when you see those types of things in a contract, you want to ask to get an idea about what that IT service provider is doing to manage the security of your data. You want to get as technical as they'll let you. Most businesses in this industry should be able to pull this out easily, because this is something that clients are asking all the time. If they can't tell you what they're doing to secure your data, it's a good time to move on to another vendor and take a look at somebody else. Second, you want to make sure that new and existing IT service providers and vendors, and this could be cloud service providers like we talked about, or it could be a totally unrelated service provider that doesn't do anything with technology, but they have access to your network. Think about like payment systems. If somebody has access to your network to pay invoices, they have access to your network. You want to make sure that they're practicing good cybersecurity as well. So any vendor that you work with that either touches your data or has access to your network, you want to review contracts and agreements with them to determine where liability could be assumed. So let's say you trust a third party to hold your data. If they are, if the breach happens at their site, you want to make sure that it's something that they're liable for, and you also want to know when that transfers back to you. So typically with like a cloud service provider contract, you're going to be responsible for maintaining a minimum standard of security, and you're also going to be responsible for your passwords. So if somebody compromises passwords and they're able to get into the cloud service as if it looks like it's you, and there's a data breach, you're going to probably be responsible for that. But you want to understand that up front before something happens and you're reviewing contracts in the middle of an incident. Thirdly, you want to make sure that you assess network and data access for each vendor. And this is what I was talking about a moment ago. When you have cloud service providers or IT providers, they're going to be the most likely contracts that you want to review, but you want to look at other types of relationships you have with other entities that might have access to your data and networks, and make sure that you do the same type of due diligence with them as you would with somebody who is managing your data. So again, moving in the cloud or the managed service model can help, but it also introduces a different type of risks, and vendor due diligence is extremely important, and it's an easy way for somebody to get in, and it's kind of a blind spot for some organizations because they're not maintaining those controls.
Yeah, in fact, without mentioning names, you look at some of the big breaches as you might have heard of in the last couple of years, it's really been a third party that ended up being the back door into the system. And so what you don't want is to let someone come in and dig a tunnel underneath your castle, or build some bridge that allows you to run over, or just go ahead and drill a big old hole right in the side of it. So you need to vet your vendors, and you need to really be asking, are they as safe as you are? And one of the best ways to do that is just to make sure you're asking them, how are they protecting your data? So there's security questionnaires that you can seek out. There's an organization called sharedassessments.org that their primary reason for existence is third-party vendor management. They have templates for questionnaires that would lead you in the direction of the kind of questions you should be looking to get answered when you're doing business with somebody. And even if you don't want to go that route, again, partnering with some sort of cyber expert, they can help you put together a good questionnaire. Whether there's 10 to 20 really good questions you should be asking each one of your vendors. And don't be afraid to get some expert guidance to evaluate them. Essentially, you want to make sure you can trust your vendors, and how do you verify? We're talking about how do you verify that they're as safe as you are.
And the last point we wanted to hit on before we start to wrap up here is that by now cybersecurity is not an easy thing to accomplish. It's something that we all need to take to care about, but there's no perfect solution. There's no there's no silver bullet, as I've heard said quite often. So another thing that's really important in any cybersecurity strategy is preparing for the worst. And I know this isn't something that's fun to think about, but if you're prepared in the event you have a data breach or a cyber incident and you know how you're going to respond, it's going to be much easier to fix the problem, and it's going to be much easier to get back up and running, and it's also going to be easier for you to help maintain your reputation if something happened, like you had customer-sensitive data that was released. So a couple of ways that you can start working on doing this are doing things like incident response planning. And think about incident response planning as like a fire drill. So you don't expect to have a fire or some type of natural disaster. Speaking of the natural disasters that are happening seemingly constantly, but you don't expect that to happen, but you know it's a possibility. The same thing is true in cyber. You don't expect to have a cyber attack, but it's definitely a possibility. So what you want to do is have an incident response plan that goes from how you detect an incident, which could be with technology or it could be with a person saying, hey, I clicked on a link. You want to make sure that there's somebody that's available to assess the severity of what happened. And then you want to make sure that you have a team that includes leadership to determine what to do next. Part of the incident response plan is going to include legal counsel, so somebody to reach out to, probably external to your organization, that's knowledgeable in data breach and privacy laws, that's going to be able to help you quarterback the response. You're going to have to reach out to a forensics firm, cyber forensics. Those are the technology experts that actually come in, find out what happened, how it happened, make sure that you contain an incident. Depending on what happens, you're also going to probably want to have a public relations firm in the mix to help you craft those responses like the ones we showed on the slide towards the beginning of the presentation. This plan doesn't have to be perfect, but if you lay out some of these strategies, if you get that phone call from the IT person that something happened, you at least have a framework of what to do. Cyber insurance, that's kind of my focus area, is a great piece for this kind of preparing for the worst concept. When you purchase cyber insurance, it not only gives you a resource to help pay claims, it actually provides access to things like what they call data breach coaches. So it's somebody that you can call if you have an incident that can help you walk through some of the legal ramifications, connects you to cyber forensics, PR, a lot of those things that you're not going to be able to just pick up, you're not going to be able to pick quickly. CAMI is a great resource to sort through and find some of those folks. But if you haven't had a chance to do that, at least you have this kind of backstop in place and a place you can turn if something does happen.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, EZShield, we don't really sell direct to the end consumer. We go to business through big partnerships, but we do offer services to small businesses that can really help in terms of that preparedness. So feel free to check out EZShield.com if you want to see what they are, not so much because we want to sell them to you, but to get an idea of the types of services that you can start to think about that you may want to get. Like, for example, a breach response plan, having something ready to go so that if a breach does occur, you're not scrambling to figure out what the heck do I do now. To actually have a plan in place and people that you can contact immediately. Being able to provide services to any victims of the breach, for example. Victim services is another one of those areas that you can look at. So if you could check out EZShield.com to get an idea of other types of services that you can be looking for that can help in terms of being prepared.
Okay, so we covered a lot here today. This is an important topic, but there's no easy solutions, as we already said. So what we want to do here is just quickly recap, give you a few links to resources, and then after the presentation, we will share our contact information. So if you have any direct questions, of course, you can reach out to us. But quickly recapping, so number one, build a foundational cyber risk profile for your business so you know where the likely attacks or exposures could come from. 2, make your business a less attractive target to cyber criminals. 3, implement the common sense security measures that Darrell talked about. Do it as quickly as possible to, again, minimize your exposure to cyber criminals. 4, as you start to look at outsourcing some of your technology and working with providers to help you with this, make sure you're thinking about vendor due diligence. And 5th, build an incident response plan. Consider adding additional services to help you recover. Again, it's not fun to think about, but you want to prepare for the worst just like you would with a fire drill or a disaster recovery plan or anything else like that. And then to the right of the slide, we have some resources here. So Darrell mentioned the blog that EZShield hosts, so that's the first link there. PSA also posts resources and information about how to manage your cyber risks, so we post them up there on the PSI Financial blog. Maryland Cyber, there's a ton of fantastic cyber companies here in Maryland that can help with a lot of these different types of issues that we've been talking about. You can find them up there by following that link. We also talked about some threat landscape and kind of staying up to date on what's going on in cyberspace. One of the resources that I like to reach out to is the CyberWire. They do a great job of aggregating all of the news and data about what's going on and things you should think about. So we put that link up there. And finally, the vendor due diligence questions that Darrell mentioned, the shared assessments, we linked that site here as well.
Thanks, guys. I know we had a question that came in earlier. Darrell?
Yeah, so here's a question we got. What is better to keep your data safe, public or private cloud? So the answer to that is yes. I think that it really depends on whether you're in using a public cloud service or you have your own private cloud. Depends on what your needs are and what your resources are. If you want to maintain a private cloud, you can make a strong case that if you could lock it down inside the right castle with the right resources, the right technical expertise. Listen, if you don't have to plug into the internet, you're safer, right? So, the question is, can you do business that way, right? So, and if you say, well, I want to pull some things in that are going to be private versus others, then you got to look at whether or not you have the army of people helping protect you or just a few. And so that's a decision you have to make based on your resources and your need. Both can be safe, both cannot be safe, depending on how they're implemented.
Okay, great. So thanks, Darrell and Mike, for all that great information. Angie, thanks for joining us. Just to let all of you know, our organization is hosting the second annual Maryland Cyber Day Marketplace on October 10th in Baltimore at the Columbus Center. It is free for cybersecurity decision makers at businesses and government agencies, nonprofit organizations to attend. Mike and Darrell and Angie and I will all be there, as will we expect 75 to 100 of Maryland cybersecurity companies, many of whom are focused on the small to medium-sized businesses. So it's a great place to get your cybersecurity questions answered, get some guidance on products and services that can help your business. We've even got Ask an Expert information stations that'll be there that day in case you have specific questions, want a cybersecurity professional to answer some of them for you. So we encourage you to join us at the marketplace. You can find information on our website at mdcyber.com. And if we don't have any other questions, I guess we're good to go. We will send the slides out as well as contact information for all of those that you heard from today. And we thank all of you for joining us.
Thanks, Stacey. It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you.